thank you all for joining us. I'm excited to be here today to interview two of our authors from the third book in the Changing Work collective book series. This book is titled, Are We Friends or Coworkers? Exploring Relationships at Work. The book will be coming out May 30th, 2025, and we're all excited and looking forward to it. So my name is Blair Morris, and I am founder and professional coach doing leadership life coaching with Liminalities Coaching and Consulting. And today I am a volunteer host and a member of the changingwork.org, as well as a contributing author in the second book in that series, which was an Amazon bestseller, very exciting there, entitled Leading with Compassion, Cultivating Connection from the Inside Out. And you can find all of the Changing Work books on bookshop.org or on Amazon. For anyone listening who may not be familiar with the Changing Work Collective, we're an online community of individuals who are committed to conscious business practices and changing work from the inside out. And today I'm so excited to be here to discuss book number 3 from this collection with 2 of the 24 contributing authors. So today we have Faith McGowan, who wrote chapter 3 entitled Beyond Boundaries, Building Relationships for Results, and Emily Raker, who wrote chapter 10, Purposeful Connection from Courage to Possibility. So both of these chapters offer really insightful learnings on relationships in the workplace. And there's some key themes that they both share, which I'm sure we're going to explore today. And I'm excited to get into those. So thank you both for being here today.
Thank you.
And let's start with
Thank you for having us.
You're quite welcome. So Faith, since you wrote the third chapter, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to write your chapter in Are We Friends or Coworkers?
Yeah, so I work as a professional fundraiser for an international nonprofit, which is a very relationship-focused role. Prior to that, I worked in another relationship-focused role as I owned a residential real estate company and learned a lot through a lot of mistakes. And as I reflect on what I've learned and how it's positively impacted my work and my relationships at work, and then as a manager of other fundraisers, I recognized that others were doing the same things, making some of the same mistakes that I did, and was really excited to be part of this project and hopefully share some of my learnings with others and support their results. And I also, as a former journalist, was really excited to kind of re-delve into my own writing. And while I wasn't insecure about my writing, as a former journalist, the writing about myself was new. And so I really appreciated this group of wonderful human beings and the support that they provided through the process.
I very much hear you on that. Going from academic writing to writing something of my own experience was a very new thing for me. So I look forward to hearing more. And Emily, please tell us about yourself and what inspired you to write your chapter.
Sure thing. I have a bit of a windy road that got me here, but I did serve about 15 years in the corporate or public services space. And I was at Microsoft for the last decade of that time. And to me, I always wrote authentically from the heart and would publish that either on Medium or on LinkedIn. And people had always told me that what I wrote really touched them at the right time. It hit home for them and gave them a tear or gave them support. So I knew that writing in this style would finally make me, give me the opportunity to spread my word, to spread my purpose and really help others reach them at the right time. Now, I did leave corporate America 2 years ago almost, and I have started my own coaching business. So I do coaching, public speaking, either with groups like the Invictus Games Foundation, um, or with individuals, and just help people through transitions. I know all too well about transitions in life, and currently going through one myself, trying to figure out what does life look like in this new space, in this new world. And so really excited to be part of the changing work group and organization, and partnering with each of you in authoring.
Great. And thank you for sharing. Thank you both. So, Faith, we'll start with you. Without giving away too much of your chapter and your story, your title, Beyond Boundaries, piqued my interest. And I'm curious about what it means to you in the context of the book and relationships. What is Beyond Boundaries?
Yeah. So the chapter starts out with my experience in real estate. I hired my best friend as my assistant. And while she was very well qualified for the role and contributed significantly to the success of the business, our relationship was not quite right. And boundaries were back then not the buzzword that they are today. So that was my first improvement when I moved past that experience, was establishing boundaries, which is a great start. It helped significantly, but it didn't quite get me where I wanted to go in terms of having more success building relationships, more purposeful relationships. And so that's the beyond boundaries, is really centering those relationships around the shared purpose that we have and the reason that we're in those relationships, rather than why we like one another, what we have in common with one another, which are wonderful things, but that isn't why we're together.
Right. And from your story, it seemed like you experienced a paradigm shift. I mean, you just kind of shared a paradigm shift on what a relationship is in maybe the workspace, and what a friendship is. What was it like to actually go through the process of a paradigm shift?
It was one of those experiences that I think I had a new manager as a fundraiser, and I was now inserting boundaries, being much more successful with that, wasn't having problems, the type of problems I had previously, but I also wasn't achieving the success that I was hoping for. So I had this new manager who really insisted on moving much more quickly in the process of securing support. And I initially really resisted that. I mean, I really felt like she didn't really understand what a relationship was and what a positive relationship was. And despite her, at that point, much more fundraising success than I had, I was very doubtful and I was very resistant. And yet, in approaching relationships closer to what she was advocating for, I achieved much greater success. And I think more importantly to the paradigm shift was the results are wonderful. And of course we want to be successful, but it really was that the relationships also were better because they were so much clearer. Previously, I wasn't being as clear about my purpose for being in front of the other person. And I think that leads to, even though our intentions are good, and my intentions were certainly good, and if I really dig into it, my intention was to avoid a no.
Mhm.
But once I became clear, it was received much better than I expected. And the relationships that resulted were not only more successful, but also much more respectful and much more trusting than my previous approach.
Hmm. May I share what your story and that share brought up for me?
Absolutely.
If you're familiar with Brene Brown and her work, where she says, clear is kind. Oh, that's a growth edge for me as someone who always danced around feelings. So I can really appreciate, you know, the challenge of that paradigm shift. And thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for putting me in the same sentence as Brene Brown.
Well deserved.
Yes, absolutely well deserved. Emily, without giving away the details of your inspiring story, can you share more about what purposeful connection means to you?
It's interesting. I think Faith and I align very well on talking about being intentional, being purposeful with our connection, and at different roles in life, I think it can mean different things. I'm grateful for the lessons that you've shared about how we can be clear and upfront. Where I came from, setting what you were saying is setting the parameters. Okay, this is what we're here together to talk about. Where I came from was the perspective of there's times in life when a little spark comes into your mind or your gut or something like that. And you have to connect with someone. You don't know why. And it's scary as all get out to most people to just walk up and connect with that person. And so, what I talk about is the times in life where I listen to that little spark and I request time to just connect. And my purpose is exploring what is that spark telling me? What do we have in common? And what can I learn from them? And so, to me, really, when you find that courage to approach somebody, um, it could be 5, 10 years down the road, you all of a sudden realize the impact that that one decision had on your life. So it really opens your life to possibility that you may never actually know the extent of all the impact that it has.
Mm. So curiosity um, leads to possibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the theme I did pick up in your story, and you just actually were speaking to it, is around that practice of the term I used, and I think you may have used, was listening in and paying attention to these nudges that come to you.
Mm-hmm.
To the Changing Work Collective is about conscious leadership. So I'm curious if these practices came into play during your decision to be part of the book or in your writing, and if so, how?
Yeah, actually, Earl was a publisher or an author of one of the previous books, and he's deeply engaged in the
Mhm.
collective. Um, and I didn't exactly know why I needed to connect with him, but I did. And we talked several times, and I asked him, what made you decide to write, become part of one of these books? And he told me his reasons and said, it may or may not be for you, but this is why I made my decision. Um, and so it's just like those little, that little nudge of, I just really need to talk to him. That's one of a zillion examples of kind of that space in life where that nudge happens and you just lean into it.
Very much so. I have learned to listen to those a lot. And now I'm curious because we talked earlier and you come from a very strong tech background. How does that self-awareness and that listening in practice work in the tech environment? And is there room for that in the tech environment?
Not just is there room, but there's necessity. Um, in tech, you're sitting behind a computer all day, every day. And even if you are in an office, which many are not right now, um, it's hard to truly make connections. So, I'll give an example. In 2014, I believe, I was at what we called a Tech Ready conference, and watching a presentation by an incredible pair of gentlemen who created the Guide Dog Project.
Mm.
And this Guide Dog Project supported the visually impaired in London and helped them navigate the world with a more rich experience. Well, I had to meet them. I knew there was just something. I'm passionate about helping people who, with accessibility challenges, mobility challenges. I'm passionate about making people's lives better. And I just really wanted to know, how did you do this? And, how can I be part of your amazingness? Like, add to it. And a decade later, I was with Jarnail, who was one of the co-creator of that product, and by that continued relationship, became the life coach of a program from the Invictus Games Foundation. And so, using technology, so Microsoft had let go of that original technology, and he took it upon himself to make sure it thrived and survived. And by having that compassion, by having that desire to connect, by bringing multiple curiosities together, it really leads to just amazing things that you would never have thought of could exist by one creative brain.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yes,
Yeah.
and I do believe it very much is a necessity in every sector
Yeah.
in the world.
It's funny, as I was setting on my background, I intentionally put my meditating frog in the lotus position behind me. And I forgot about this until you were doing the practice as we all got grounded and became together. So in my story, I talk about Josh, who was a manager of mine, and he was one of the managers who I had who really allowed me to be me and see that value. And just he never gave me answers, always let me lead. And there were those times when you have those challenges, you encounter those difficult relationships, you don't know how to solve the problem, and you just want to scream some curse words. And I would go in his office and I would sit down on the floor in the lotus position and just sit there. And he must have thought I was nuts, but at the same time, we always came to some amazing ideas together when had that space to really just sit and be authentic and real and pause and think.
Wow. I wish I worked with people like that.
Yeah. He was one of the best managers ever, for sure.
Oh, someone you need to thank for that. Very much
Yeah.
so. Well, gosh, thank you both for those shares about your chapters. So, you know, I really enjoyed reading the book, and your chapters both resonated with me deeply. Um, I only wish I had read them when I was a younger manager, leader, many years ago. Could have made me a better person for those I worked with. So, and it was really only when I was leaving healthcare that I realized the importance of respecting how we approach relationships at work and not just taking them for granted, or assuming that because you were connected by the purpose in that organization that you would remain connected afterwards. Um, and sometimes those relationships do change, especially as we transition out of different jobs. So I really do respect what I learned from both of you during those chapters. Um, I found a strong current or theme around purpose that you both spoke about. Really resonated deeply in both of your chapters, in purposeful connection and shared purpose. There's that word, purpose. And it strikes me that we may ought to be more intentional with what is our purpose in a relationship, whether it's a friendship or a collegial or a client relationship or to your point, Faith, a potential donor, a prospect, and an organization with needs. So um, I thank you both for that illumination, about that intention.
Yeah,
So
Blair, earlier we were talking about purpose as those relationships can shift.
mhm.
You know, and I really, Faith, I know you started your chapter really talking about wanting to be friendly with everyone and really wanting to get to know them as them. And, I experienced that big shift becoming a coach. And I experienced it with my coach. I had always coached people unofficially in my previous career, but becoming a coach, suddenly there are these boundaries that must be respected. Because when you become friends with someone, you start to care about the outcomes. You start to have opinions about what they should or shouldn't do. And that's just normal human behavior, a desire to care about wanting the best for people. And as a coach, you want the best for them, but you want the best that they want for them. And so I had a moment so my coach is phenomenal and she has shifted my entire life. Um, and we had a moment where it was like, wait a second, we're becoming friends. We got to pause because this is no longer a coaching relationship. And it was really difficult and it hurt my feelings and it made her sad. And then when we came back together, I said, I need you and I'm willing to set new boundaries. And it's really been a blessing that she was able to say that honestly to me and just be clear and kind and say, okay, we've crossed some boundaries. Like, let's reevaluate.
Beautiful share.
And I
Beautiful.
think you're right that the boundaries, we're very familiar with boundaries and they're very important. But what is missing oftentimes is what to do better. And I think that this book is really getting toward that and at that.
Mm,
Yeah.
great point there. Great point. What other things have resonated with either of you about each other's chapters?
I think for me, Emily's chapter is a really good balance to mine, because I think obviously the shared purpose is very important and leads to success. I think Emily's chapter is a good reminder to be open to what that purpose may be, to, maybe we don't always have that purpose. Maybe it's impossible to identify that purpose from the start, which was a great reminder for me. And I think it doesn't mean that we aren't still aiming for shared purpose. It's just a recognition that we may discover it together.
Mm.
Thanks, Faith. I appreciate that. Yours left me wanting you to teach me more. So I think I oftentimes go into conversation with people with that very open perspective. But let's say I'm talking to somebody who could be a client. Like I was at a networking event last week, the first networking event I've been at since 2018. Lost my voice in 2 hours. I was so overwhelmed. It just, but I realized that people were handing out business cards and asking for business. And I was like, oh, how are you? How do you enjoy living here? What brought you here this evening? Um, and there were 3 or 4 people that I could have said, would you like to talk about working with me? And I didn't. And so I think it's partially I'm just so interested in like learning about them. I got sick of talking about myself, but I would have loved some kind of like angel on my shoulder saying, ask them for business, like tell them exactly what you do. How can you help them? It's like I love that it sounds like you were able to get your message crisp and concise and be able to walk into a room and quickly assess, are we on the same alignment or not? This is my purpose of being here. So I want to learn more from you.
Well, and I want to stay open with you. So there we go.
Sounds great. Would you like to work with me?
There you go. I think I need a faith sitting on my shoulder too when I am working on building my coaching business. Make it a lot easier to be direct. So, from the writing process perspective, yeah, I'm curious about each of your experiences in writing this chapter and what was the biggest learning experience you had? Faith, we'll go with you.
Yeah. As I said, it was a great experience for me. I had the idea for my chapter and I was able to articulate that. But in terms of really fleshing it out, the group, the cohort, and my smaller writing pod was really helpful with the feedback that I got, which was really questions. Now I want to know this. Now I want to hear more about this. What about that? Was so helpful. I knew what I wanted to say. I didn't know exactly how to say it. And I also wasn't super clear on how much detail, how much of my current role really translated to other roles and other situations. And so that the collaborative process was amazing. I can't imagine writing the chapter or something more minus that. So really loved it.
Lovely, lovely. Emily, how about it for you?
Yeah, there were two. There was one really nice kind of affirmation, and then some great lessons. So I've been writing in this voice for quite a while, so it was really exciting to be able to do that. The writing itself was very easy for me because I just needed to tell a story the way I talk. However, I came in with an idea. I think we were originally gonna, we were prompted to write about community at work, I believe. And I was really, I had ironed out, I know what I'll put in there. It doesn't mean happy hours. It doesn't mean virtual coffees. It like there's real true connection and talking about my work with the Brene Brown tool sets like that I created from her work. And then we switched a little bit and I was so grateful for the pod because in talking through things, I came up with my story. Like I remembered just the brilliance of the connections that I had made and how I'm such a firm believer in the butterfly effect. So one little thing that happened back in 2016, being moved to sit next to Sean, who then introduced me to Josh, who then introduced me to Scott, who then, all of this stuff, it turned into a much better story than it would have been. But I think the other thing I really learned, and it just was so affirming, was that I am a good writer. I've been doing it a while. I just don't know how to put it out into the world. I mean, I've got my Medium channel. I've written a number of things on LinkedIn, but then pulled them back as they outdated. And so working with an editor and a publisher and a group of folks, I actually I was surprised. I got my first edit back and it was one sentence that she suggested I reconsider if I want to put it that way or not. And I thought, well, aren't you supposed to teach me how to write better? it took me, and it took me a minute to realize that was a huge compliment. And so it was very affirming for me as well. And I'm excited. Like this is a really exciting opportunity to perhaps have a larger platform to reach.
Thank you. Thank you both. Before we wrap up, where can those listening to this find you if they wanted to follow or reach out to you? Emily, you mentioned on Medium. Are there other ways that people should find you?
Yeah, also on LinkedIn. That's my primary place where I publish. I will be setting up a Substack account, but I haven't yet. But for right now, LinkedIn is the best way. And then if you follow my Medium, it's uh, at em_raker. So that's em is m for nickname underscore raeker. Um, that's the best way to kind of keep up to date on what I'm writing.
Great. Thank you. And Faith, what about you?
I am also on LinkedIn and I am on Substack, both my name and I also have a philanthropy focused newsletter on Substack called Love for Humanity.
Mm, very much needed there. Thank you. And I thank you both for sharing your valuable insights today, for your powerful contributions to Book 3, Are We Friends or Coworkers? Exploring Relationships at Work, which is published May 30th of this year, 2025. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, we invite you to explore our first two best-selling books, Leading with Self-Awareness, Starting from the Inside Out, and Leading with Compassion, Cultivating Connection from the Inside Out. Both are available now at bookshop.org and Amazon. And if this conversation sparks something meaningful for you, please consider sharing it with your network, your colleagues, your community. And if you'd like to connect with others on the journey to create more conscious, human-centered workplaces, we invite you to join us and learn more about the growing community at changingwork.org. Thank you for being part of the movement to change work from the inside out, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you all. So grateful for you.